There we go. Woo!
Yay. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and mute this. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. My name is Hiro, and I am an alcoholic. I'm so grateful to be here, grateful to be sober, and so delighted to be able to present about this pamphlet uh, to all of you in the Pacific Northwest. And I just noticed my sponsor Will logged on just now as well. Welcome, Will. And so the title of this presentation is AA for Alcoholics with Mental Health Issues and Their Sponsors, or How to Be a Medical Advocate for Your Sponsee or Loved One in Psychiatric Care. And so here, let me move on to this. Well, I'll introduce with this. I have a sobriety date of November 12th, 2007. And this is my first time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a friend, Candace M, who says this is my first and only time in Alcoholics Anonymous because I put AA first. That's not entirely my experience. This is my first time because I tried everything else before, and because I try to put AA first most of the time, and when I don't, um, it's just been grace or dumb luck that I haven't been driven to behave in ways that I don't intend to or don't want to. Um, and we just came out of a global, incredibly difficult time, and thank God for intergroups like yours, for the Puget Sound intergroup or the Seattle intergroup. And one of the things that we all know who've been out around Alcoholics Anonymous for a little bit, and who, especially those of us who love studying AA history, is that every key moment in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous uh, is a time of great disunity in the world. And if you think about it, 1935, Great Depression, uh, 38 when the Big Book was being written, 39 when it was published, um, horrific acts of imperialism happening in Europe and in Asia and in Africa. Uh, and if you think about when the first Young People's Alcoholics Anonymous meetings were unofficially meeting in 1945 to 46, it's a time when of reconstruction and economic depression for the losing sides and rebuilding, and also a time of great tension with the Cold War starting. If you think about 1947, when Wilson first writes the 12 the 12 long form of the 12 traditions in April in the Grapevine. Again, it's a time of great uncertainty in the world. 1950, our very first international, what was now known as the first international conference, a time when Truman decides we're going to go to war with Korea, and we decide to make a hydrogen bomb. 1955, when we officially start having the General Service Conference. We have the experimental one that starts in 51 and all the way to 55, deep into the Cold War. The House Un-American Activities Committee is dividing the United States. And 1962, when the 12 concepts essays came out with that was the day, the first day of the General Service Conference, in 1962 was the last day of the Bay of Pigs invasion, which is when Kennedy almost brought us to World War III by accident, and most recently with this global pandemic. And A adapts. And the worse the disunity in the world, the greater the unity in Alcoholics Anonymous, thanks to the traditions, thanks to the concepts, and thanks to our individual work with our sponsors and with the God that we've discovered in our understanding through the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I just wanted to acknowledge my hosts, our hosts, the Seattle and Puget Sound intergroups. And so thank you so much. Oh, I see. I have to go over here. So this is my service resume, and my home group is the Bellflower Big Book Group. We meet on Monday nights since we opened up after lockdown. Again, this last June, we were back up to like about 300 people in the room, about 150 in Zoom. Um, when I first got sober, this woman in my home group, and what was to become my home group, Wednesday night, the Big Book study of the Big Book group. This woman, Barbara F., puts her arm around my shoulder and she says, "Honey, I know you have a sponsor, but you also have a board of directors, honey, and I'm on it." And so she's been telling me what to do and been very kind to me ever since. In 2010, she puts her arm around my shoulder at the big speaker meeting on Monday night, and she says, "Honey, I'm your service sponsor now." And I said, "Thank you. I don't know what that means." And she said, "Oh, it means, honey, you're gonna be our GSR one day, and someday later, you're gonna be our delegate, honey." And my immediate thought was, the district meeting meets on Wednesday nights. I work that night. And she says, "Oh, honey, God's gonna change your schedule for you," and He does. And very soon afterwards, my schedule changes, and I start. That was panel 61, become alternate GSR. Then our GSR goes to jail on an amends, not on current behavior. And then I immediately become the GSR. And then I continue with the GSR position in panel 62, become chair of our district a couple years later. And was the GSR school chair at both the district and the area for the next panel. And also become chair of the area 2 years after that. And then I was chosen out of the hat to be alternate delegate. I was left in the hat for delegate and chosen out of the hat for alternate delegate for Mid-Southern California Area 9. And I had to resign in 21 due to Zoom restrictions. The very beginning of Zoom, I transferred all my work to telework as well. Did all my teletherapy. And I discovered during the beginning of lockdown that I'm one of the few people that gets Zoom fatigue so badly that I was losing 1 to 3 days of work every week and throwing up every week. It was kind of like being a teen alcoholic again. I just couldn't control and enjoy my Zoom, so I had to resign. And so today I'm the homeroom bathroom captain and Harbor Area Central Office H&I Committee Registrar, which is just my speed. So it's important for you to know that I am an alcoholic and I'm not a physician. But however, as a result of AA and education, supervised clinical education and hard work, I am a licensed psychologist in California. So that's talk, not drugs. Psychologist versus psychiatrist. And from very early on, this woman who got sober in 1970, Judy Caduti, who now lives up in Seattle and goes to Empire Way Group, which is her home group. She, when I first met her on that same night that I met Barbara F. At the Wednesday night meeting of my current home group, she, rushes up to me like in her little speed waddle, and she says, "Are you Japanese?" I'm like, "Yes, I am. I didn't know that was a requirement." She says, "It's not, but it's nice to see another one of us." And one of the things she told me when I had a bright idea to go and counsel alcoholics for a fee, she said, "Don't do it. Don't work in treatment. Some people can do that okay, but it'll kill you." And I'm like, "Why?" Like, "You think too much. You'll start thinking that's your AA work, and then you'll stop doing AA, and then you'll drink, and then you'll die." And I was like, "Huh, that seems extreme, but likely." So I haven't. And so from that moment, I've been able to just focus on working with alcoholics for fun and for free, just for free and for fun. And all of my psychotherapy work, if someone ends up, I discover that someone's an alcoholic, which happens, then I send them to Alcoholics Anonymous and ease that transition. And then in 2011, I got licensed in California, and the state license for clinical psychologists comes from the Board of Psychology. The Board of Psychology is part of the Department of Consumer Affairs in the state of California. And the Department of Consumer Affairs exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to protect Californians from potentially harmful people like an alcoholic like me. And thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, Californians don't need to be protected from me. So for alcoholics, Big Book, 12 and 12, 12 concepts. This too, I'm not your therapist. I'm not licensed in Washington, but of course, and I'm not dispensing medical advice. I'm just giving best practice instruction on how to be a good medical advocate for your sponsees in Alcoholics Anonymous or for your loved ones. So this is based entirely off of this lovely pamphlet, Alcoholics AA for Alcoholics with Mental Health Issues and their sponsors. Buried at the very back um, of this pamphlet is an afterword with a series of best practice suggestions inside of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's actually adapted from the AA member Medications and Other Drugs, which came out many years before. And oh, and if you don't know about this pamphlet, it is so lovely. The first section is all the first section is all uh, alcoholics who needed to be on medication in order to get and stay sober. The second section is all stories from sponsors who sponsor people who require psychiatric care, and then there's the experience with the best practices for in the afterword here. And so here's what it says in the afterword. The subject of medication and mental health can involve important medical decisions. To help AA members find the right balance and minimize the risk of relapse, a group of physicians who are members of AA developed the suggestions that follow. Additionally, to provide a professional perspective, two healthcare professionals who are familiar with AA were asked to review this pamphlet and found it to represent an accurate cross-section of alcoholics they have come into contact with in their professional capacity. Understandably, some AA members must take prescribed medications for serious medical problems. However, it is generally accepted that the misuse of prescription medication and other drugs can threaten the achievement and maintenance of sobriety. It may be possible to minimize the threat of relapse if the following suggestions are heeded. First, no AA member should play doctor. All medical advice and treatment should come from a qualified physician. Now, from this slide for the rest, the bold at the very top, these are all the bullets from the back of the pamphlet. So no one should play doctor, including me. And however, as a sponsor, if your sponsee agrees, you could be an invaluable advocate at psychiatric appointments. Now, here's what you might have missed. At the very beginning of COVID, on March 11th, so March 16th was when my home group went dark. March 11th, there was a study published, and this was actually a Stanford psychologist who, prior to his research, he was a little bit like Jack Alexander. He was wanting to prove that AA doesn't work, and what he discovered is that AA works incredibly well. And on that day, there was a meta-analysis which is comparing all the studies that one can find, and so they found 35 studies. And they involved more than 10,000 participants. And it showed that when it comes to maintaining sobriety, AA is more effective than psychotherapy or no treatment, regardless of age or gender or the study participants or the country they lived in. Yes, we can't be all things to all people. And yes, right now, the best thing that science can show us is that we're the best thing in town. Second bullet, active participation in the AA program of recovery is a major safeguard against alcoholic relapse, something all of us on this Zoom know. And one thing that's different from AA in the 40s, for example, is that now many become separated from alcohol for the first time in hospitals, rehabs, medical treatment facilities, and now it's fairly common to be medicated in such places, and this can amount to over medication because medication is based on an assessment, and usually people are in acute withdrawal while they're being assessed, and acute withdrawal can look like a lot of other mental illnesses. And also, which leads to this last point, being drunk, being dependent on alcohol, being withdrawal from alcohol can mimic many diagnoses, and pretty much nearly every single diagnosis says make sure that all the symptoms that you're seeing, that you're assessing, aren't due to alcohol or drug intoxication, dependence, or withdrawal. This is also from another bullet and also kind of a no-brainer. Be completely honest with your doctor and yourself about the way you take medicine. Let your doctor know if you skip doses or take more medication than prescribed. Now, one of the things that happened for me is when I took my first fifth step with my sponsor, and I asked him how, this is amazing. How does this work? Why, how come all those folks that I saw before, all the myriad physicians and doctors and therapists and coaches and physical trainers and nutritionists and dietitians and all the why couldn't these folks help me? And my sponsor told me, my first sponsor, Wild Bill, said well, Hiro, all those people are really good at what they do, but they cannot help you if you lie to them, and you can't possibly tell the truth if you can't tell the truth from the false. So this is one of the key places where a sponsor or any other person that's close to the AA or close to the patient can be tremendously helpful as medical advocates. The problem with psychiatric care is it depends almost entirely on patient report of symptoms, of history, of accurate accounts of the effects of medication changes. And even without alcoholism recovery, so many medications make it really difficult to reflect or to remember or to recount our experiences accurately. So if your sponsee is a consumer of psychiatric services, they may want you or a family member to accompany them to advocate on their behalf by providing observations or the family member's observations, as well as helping the sponsee to provide an accurate history of treatments and how they respond to current and past medications. Perfect example. This is before my sobriety date, and I'm trying to find a medical solution to what turned out to be a spiritual problem, spiritual malady. And I'm working in my pre-doctoral internship at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I'm having such a hard time with insomnia and panic attacks at work, and driving a couple hours round trip, and not doing well. And I seek psychiatric care for the first time, and at one point I was on so many medications that my wife was getting really, really concerned because sometimes I would physically kind of get immobilized and unable to move, and of course this is all because I'm being my own physician as well. I'm being my own alchemist. I'm mixing and matching, and I was having so many migraines and trying to treat those, and it came a point where I was having panic attacks. I developed a stutter that I had never had before, and which still plagues me sometimes today. And my wife asked me after she accompanied me to the doctor's office. She sat in the waiting room with me and didn't know that I could ask her to come into the doctor's office with me. She had no idea. And so I go in, I come out within 5 minutes, and she had a list of like 15 things she wanted me to tell him. I come back, she says, "Hey, did you tell him any of those things?" I'm like, "No." She says, "Well, what happened? I mean, did you tell him that you can't seem to finish some of your sentences? I mean, this happens like a few times every 5 minutes. Did you tell him that it's hard for you to think in paragraphs? It's hard for you to think in full in blocks of an argument and be linear. Have you told him all of these?" And I was like, "No." And she says, "What did you do?" And he said, "Well, he gave me another medication." And she was livid. And so this is one of those places where you can certainly help. Whoops, I went backwards. All right. Explain to your doctor that you no longer drink alcohol and you're trying a new way of life in recovery. So here's some pamphlets that you might want to provide your medical provider with: medication and other drugs. This very pamphlet. You might consult with your district or the area's cooperation with the professional community committee, and all of the cooperation with the professional committee or CPC. Cooperation with the professional community committee. Pamphlets and materials are also available at aa.org. The pamphlet goes on to say, let your doctor know at once if you have a desire to take more medicine or if you have side effects that make you feel worse. Be sensitive to warnings about changes in your behavior when you start a new medication or when your dose is changed. So clear suggestions of listen to your sponsee, help them communicate their needs to their prescriber. And here's the kicker. Every single pharmacotherapeutic medication can cause the symptom it's intended to treat. And it can also cause the opposite of what it's intended to treat. And this is not only while taking it, but it's also while withdrawing from it. So this horrible thing happens. This has been well documented, where people will, where a patient who's taking a medication for depression, let's say, starts going off of their medication, perhaps too quickly, and then suddenly they have like rebound depression, and at that point, something that happens all too commonly is not only a return to the original dosage, but depending on the severity of the rebound depression, an increase in dosage, when the most parsimonious, in other words, the simplest explanation is to go back up to the previous step and then step down more slowly. So if you find that feel that your doctor doesn't understand your problems, consider making an appointment with a physician who has experience in the treatment of alcoholism. So here are some things to keep in mind. This is from Peter Breggin, who's the only expert witness in the only success, who is the expert witness in the only successful class action lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company. And this is when all those teenagers were dying of suicide when they were on their antidepressants. And so what he says is that because most continuing education for prescribers is provided by pharmaceutical companies, this causes a problem. And the gold standard for going off medications is one drug at a time, and either when you're starting or going off of them. And always ask if you can wean off more slowly than recommended. If they're saying, "Hey, cut this in half every week," you can say, "Hey, could I take 3/4 for 2 weeks?" And unless you're getting toxic effects, no prescriber will say that's a bad idea. Most will tell you that it's unnecessary, but it wouldn't be there's no contraindication. Never go off cold turkey from a medication that you've slowly built up. That's a great way to have a withdrawal effects from medication, and please do not wean off without medical supervision. Back to the pamphlet. From the earliest days of Alcoholics Anonymous, it has been clear that many alcoholics have a tendency to become dependent on drugs other than alcohol. There have been tragic incidents of alcoholics who have struggled to achieve sobriety, only to develop a serious problem with a different drug. Time and time again, AA members have described frightening and sobriety-threatening episodes that could be related to the misuse of medication or other drugs. Experience suggests that while some prescribed medications may be safe for most non-alcoholics when taken according to a doctor's instructions, it is possible that they may affect the alcoholic in a different way. It is often true that these substances, when used without medical supervision, can create dependence as devastating as dependence on alcohol. Therefore, it is always important to consult your doctor if you think medication may be helpful or needed. Here are some concluding suggestions. If you're sponsoring a newcomer before the prescribed medications, you could have them ask, or you could ask the prescriber whether the patient can safely remain unmedicated while taking the steps. And if you're sponsoring a newcomer who's leaving a facility where they were medicated, asking the prescriber whether all the medications need to be continued, perhaps before they leave or as soon as they're connected to a prescriber. In this day and age, before they leave is often best if it's possible, because it's so hard to get an appointment with a good psychiatrist these days. And see, without being on a waiting list, and see whether the prescriber will assist a step down to the lowest needed dosage as steps are started, using the earlier suggestions. Half the step down, twice as slowly, one medication at a time, unless otherwise indicated. If you're sponsoring a newcomer with long-term medication use who's stable, take them through the steps as usual. When they begin to sponsor others, in other words, when they're all the way up into step 12, join them in meeting with their prescriber to see if they can begin titrating down to the lowest optimal dosage. The guiding idea is the least pharmacotherapy necessary for health, well-being, and the greatest access to spiritual experience. And finally, never go on or off medications without medical supervision. And this last piece, please, please, please take a course in mental health first aid. You may or may not know that every first lady ends up having a a particular social issue that they want to kind of tackle for 4 years. And for Michelle Obama, she chose mental health first aid during the first presidency, and I had never heard of it before. And here I am studying to be a psycho. No, by this point I was already done. Um, uh, I had gone through all the psychology training, gotten my doctorate, and she's talking about mental health first aid, and I had never heard of it before. And I went and looked it up on the website, and at that time there were all these testimonial videos that would crop up. And my favorite one was this trucker, and he says, I was driving the rig over that suicide bridge, and I saw a fella. He was pulled over, and he was looking down at the water, and I just pull over the rig, and I come in, and I have that kind of conversation we were taught to do in mental health first aid. And then next thing I know, he's in the cab with me, and we're driving off to some place where he can get some help. And that was just so beautiful. And mental health first aid is available locally for you. Please get it. I think, especially what COVID and its aftermath have shown us is that we have a horrific mental health epidemic that's perhaps worse than COVID, the effects of it. And you can help. You can help. And lastly, oh, it's question time. Yay, it's time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiro. What's happening there? Sorry, I unmuted the wrong computer.
We got to hear infinity.
I know, isn't that crazy? Okay, so we have a few questions, and you can hear me okay?
I can hear you wonderfully.
Great. All right, so I see somebody has a hand raised. What we're doing is we are putting questions in the chat. If I can manage this. All right, sorry. Yes, these slides will be made available. That is something that, that's a question that came up. Will the slides be made available? The whole recording will be placed on our YouTube channel. Seattle Intergroup has a YouTube channel, and the slides will accompany the audio recording of this presentation today. And so the question is, with privacy laws, can a sponsor or friend talk to a doctor about someone's meds, like asking them if they can safely stay off while they're doing the steps? Personally, I would be afraid to do that.
Wonderful. So all the privacy laws are there to protect the patient. And so as long as the patient signs a release of information and consent to talk to you, then that's all they have to do. So all I had to do with my psychiatrist was to let the receptionist or my psychiatrist know that I want to sign a release of information, that I want my wife to be privy to everything. I want her to come in to accompany me to all of my appointments, and that would have been enough. That would have been perfectly okay. And it's important for you to know that any clinician worth their salt would never say no unless there is a concern for the safety of the patient.
Okay.
What a great question.
The next questions have to do with the mental health first aid. Somebody said that they've been waiting for 6 months to get in. So apparently there's a long waiting list. And there must be courses online that can you recommend any is the question.
I'll have to investigate that, and because that would be so important to be able to do, and I imagine that it is really backed up in person. So I will investigate it. You can too, and if I find an answer to it, I will send it to Seattle Intergroup, and they could have it have my response accompany the YouTube posting.
Okay, great. The next question is, can you speak to Xanax and Suboxone specifically? Suboxone is being given often as is Vivitrol to manage symptoms of withdrawal. Any experiences you can share?
I'm only going to share personal experience instead of medical information. Personal experience is I'm a puker, and I know many of you were pukers as well, but I also have the Asian flush, which means I have the natural-born antibodies in my body, which means that if you ever suspect me of being drunk and you see me and I'm holding forth and I'm hilarious, apparently you can hang out and I may entertain you. But if you ever see all the blood flush from my face and I turn sheet white and all this sweat pop out on my forehead, that's the time to back up to about 6 feet, because that's my puking radius. And because of that, I really have an affinity for Xanax and other benzos. Benzos are like, because if I have two Xanax or two Valium, and an old fashioned, or 4 fingers of whiskey, then what happens is it's like I've drank half a bottle. I don't have to pee. I don't have to throw up, and it's wonderful. Of course, then all this things get worse far more quickly. So Xanax and other benzodiazepines basically mimic alcohol, and they tie to the same receptors, and that's one of the reasons why I love them so much. And so it's not my favorite thing to go to. And there's so many ways of addressing anxiety without Xanax. The other problem with Xanax too is one of the reasons why I kept having panic attacks at work is I made sure not to take Xanax at work, and I would lower my dosage, where I was like expanding my dosage at night. And I was having withdrawal effects, and what a withdrawal effect from Xanax is severe anxiety or panic attacks. And so that was happening while I was working at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and that's not a pretty sight for one of your intern psychologists to be having panic attacks, especially if I'm treating, say, 7-year-olds for generalized anxiety disorder. So the other thing is that that short term, especially early on, depending on someone's history, using Suboxone especially to withdraw from opiates may be indicated, but long-term use is never indicated. All the research on things like even like Ambien, like my psychiatrist had me on Ambien for like the first 6 months of working at Children's Hospital, and Ambien has a black box warning on it, like you're supposed to stop taking it after 2 weeks, and who does that? And how many psychiatrists tell us to do that? And so use with caution, and I think really making sure to it's helpful if you're ever doing those. All of the AA lore is absolutely great. Make sure that somebody else is in charge of your medication. Like I love, like now if I had to do anything that required something like that, like in order to, if I had like surgery, and in order not to split my stitches, I needed to take something, I would have somebody else provide it for me if I were to take it. Thank you.
So I have a question about just a little follow-up on that. Is there any sort of advocacy for somebody that we're working with in detox being, or let's say they've gone through detox and they're out, they have 6 or 7 days, and they leave with the prescription, right, of Suboxone or some sort of benzo. I'm not sure I mean, I know they give benzos in detox. I don't know if you leave I think they leave with prescriptions for at least a period of time. What's the advice that we could best give a newcomer that with those medicines?
I think that get them connected to a clinician as quickly as possible, even if it's to a general practitioner or a psychiatric nurse, or a psychiatric physician's assistant, um, and and that way, safely having them titrate down, depending on the length of time that they were at their location, and uh, and this is one of those times to just quickly get people into the steps and working through them. Again, I really do not like telling people to get off their meds. I do not tell people to get off their meds without being connected to a prescriber. Just to make sure that they're here. I need to tell you a story. I used to think that all of the sober from the neck up being equivalent to no psychiatric medications. I thought that all came from the Pacific Group and from Clancy. And so back in 2015? I think it was 2015. I'm out in Vegas. I'm with my sponsor. I'm there for the Derelicts retreat. You know, my sponsor's retreat for all of his sponsees and grand sponsees and some great grand sponsees. And this happens in June. And I go with my sponsor to go pick up his sponsor, Clancy. And so we go to the McCarran Airport. I'm carrying his luggage, and I'm just so thrilled to be there. And I put his luggage in the back, and I get in the back seat, and they're having a conversation. They're just catching up, you know, sponsor, sponsee, and I'm just a fly on the wall. I'm soaking up everything. And at one point, I don't remember what started it, but Clancy said, you know, the last time I asked anyone to go off their medication was back at the beginning of the 80s when I asked that famous actress to go off all of her medications. And the next thing, you know, she was on TV, you know, with like she was on in tabloids because of a full-blown manic episode. And I had no idea. I had no idea that he had stopped, and yet there were members of the group that were still saying, you know, well, this is how, you know, sobriety means you don't take any medications at all. And so strange how long it takes for lore like that to change and become experience.
Thank you, Hiro. We have a question from somebody at the podium.
Mike, real alcoholic. I suffer from true manic depression, and you know, with my manias, it's still hard to work, you know, a program at AA because I come across as, you know, very angry and hostile. But usually, you know, with a good night's sleep and a meal, it helps the mania. But also on the downside, I suffer, you know, the depression. And I've just recently, quote unquote, snapped out of a clinical depression. I mean, hell, you know, I let my fingernails grow for like 3 weeks. I wasn't bathing. I wasn't in contact with anybody in AA. And about 2 weeks ago, I had to check myself into the psychiatric ward because I was working a graveyard shift that was, you know, 12 days on, 2 days off, up and down, up and down. And like you had just mentioned, the psychiatrist prescribed me Ambien, and it's been working like a charm. I take some of that with some supplements, and I fall right to sleep. And I've been able to make it to my new job on time and whatnot. But are you telling me that Ambien is kind of just like should be in and out, just real, don't stay on it for too long? Or
That's the thing. Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for your question. And man, that sounds so brutal. Your experience. So with Ambien, yes, there's a Food and Drug Administration black box warning on it to not take it for longer than 2 weeks. I don't know of any prescriber who tells you to do that, to stop after 2 weeks. I would also not stop abruptly. What you might find is that if you do long-term Ambien use, like I did, that the effects start to go back and back and back, so that by the time I was using Ambien, as well as many other things, so this probably accelerated how the shortness of the efficacy window, the effectiveness, I ended up waking up at 4 hours. Like 4 hours was my top. And if you sleep 3 to 4 hours every night, and you do this for months, then of course that can lead to sleep deprivation psychosis.
Yeah.
There's a number of things I would suggest. So sometimes one is mindfulness meditation. There's something called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And mindfulness-based stress reduction, when people come to me and they say, "Hey, Hiro, I'm experiencing a lot of stress," I tell them, you know what, this might not be the best time for the gold standard evidence-based stress therapy. And they're like, "Why not? I need it. I'm really stressed." And my response is, well, the best practices for stress require you to add more time to your life. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, the way that it's been researched, is waking up an hour early every morning, adding 45 minutes of meditation 6 days a week. On the seventh day, taking a 3-hour class. You do this for 8 weeks with all these guided meditations, and then if you continue the practice of meditating every day, this can help so many different things. And most people are too stressed to do that at times when they come to see me. And so what I sometimes do is, I ask them, can you do 20 minutes a day? If they can do 20 minutes a day, I'll put this in the chat. You could do something called, one fellow, oops, somehow I didn't copy it. One fellow made this, one psychologist made a smaller version of it for free. Hallou's mindfulness. It's 20 minutes a day. So you wake up half an hour early. Even that is a lot for people. So you might start with a simple app like Headspace.
Yeah.
The point of it is this, that it's the practice of noticing where my mind goes, and then the practice of recognizing that that's not connected to my mind. The second thing I would say is that so much of what we say in Alcoholics Anonymous to do is straight out of the playbook. Actually, one of the evidence-based psychotherapies for severe depression is behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is something that most sponsors tell their sponsees to do. Get out of bed, hit your knees and pray, make the bed, make sure to shower, make sure to have breakfast needed, make sure to go to work, try to get there 10 to 20 minutes early, pray in the parking lot before you go in and give, a dime's work for a nickel's pay, take your breaks, on your breaks, walk around, hydrate, eat a little something, pray, talk to an alcoholic, go back to work, do the same thing, take your lunch, go and eat a healthy lunch, pray, call me, to call other alcoholics, talk to them, ask them how their day is going. And so it's basically getting people to get out of the little horrific worldview that I am so good at doing. The cognitive psychologists call it the negative triad of depression, a pervasive negative view of self, world, and future. I suck, you and everyone else sucks, and we're all gonna suck forever. And the best way to get out of that is to do things that make no sense from that mindset, like make the bed. What the hell is that gonna do? Hit my knees? Seriously? What? And what, trim my nails? How is that gonna help my feelings? And all we have to do is believe, even if it's just believing a sponsor. That's enough of a higher power for me sometimes, just to do a little bit of what I don't believe in. And the more I do what I don't believe in, the more I come to believe in a power that's much greater than me. And the more I can hear this power and beneficial things for me and others from so many other people inside of the fellowship. Also, with anxiety, try and look for all the times that you're not anxious. Like if you find yourself getting anxious and like worrying, try to look for all the times that you're not anxious. The problem with any sort of mindset, whether it's I have to drink, whether it's everyone hates me, they're all after me, whether it's oh no, I need to be nervous about something, is that these kind of pervasive, intense mindsets convince us that it helps us to accidentally focus on things that prove that mindset and help us to selectively ignore all of the evidence that suggests it's not true. And so if you're plagued with anxiety, do your best today to look for times when you're not anxious. In other words, God will just poke out in all these moments, and people with like severe anxiety disorder will tell me in therapy, Doc, that's crazy. There are no moments without anxiety. And I say things to them like, I don't know, have you peed today? And if you have, try to wait as long as possible so that when you pee, all you experience at the beginning of a pee is just, oh, just, oh, thank God I didn't get it on me and it's in the right spot. Like, oh, that's amazing. Or at the very beginning of a sneeze, all that's there at the beginning of a sneeze, if there's worry, is I hope I don't sneeze on you. And but the beginning of a sneeze is just it's just the release of a sneeze. And there are thousands of moments throughout the day, whether it's like, oh, cookies, or whether it's like, who's licking me? Oh, it's you. Oh, hello, pet, pet, pet. There are thousands of moments throughout the day that where you can find that there's no anxiety at all, and all we have to do is look for them. In other words, all we have to do is look for God to poke through our like our spiritual malady, our untreated alcoholism, our stone cold sober, our unmanageability. Thank you so much, Mike. That was a fantastic question.
Thank you, Hiro. Next question is, how do you handle it when AA members share in meetings that one is only really sober when they don't take any medication, without cross-talking, of course?
That's a fantastic question. So not only is that a traditions violation, but it's also playing doctor without a license, and dangerous. And so early on, when I first learned about the traditions, and about kind of affiliating with medicine or becoming, showing expertise, et cetera, I thought it was my job to police those folks, and none of them have asked me to sponsor them to start with. So I'm trying to like sponsor someone who hasn't asked me to sponsor him. It's like the problem I run into my wife. I try to sponsor her all the time and she won't let me. And so again, it's getting into step 3 management problems. I really want to manage that, and that always gets me to unmanageability. I can usually spot the folks that this is disturbing, especially if they get to the podium and share about it as well. And what I try to do is I catch those folks, and I try to let them know that that's just one alcoholic who's not a physician, who's not a psychiatrist, who's not a psychologist. If I know the person, I might just say, that guy's a dental hygienist, or that person's a lawyer, it's so they're always wanting to give advice, but don't listen to that one. And kind of take them under the wing. And I really like what Mac B, who passed away a few years ago at 35 years sober. And after he passed away, one of his sponsees told me, Mac always tells every single one of his sponsees, there are people in your home group and there's people in Alcoholics Anonymous who are going to kill you dead. There are also people in AA and people in your home group that are going to save your life. Your job is to figure out which is which. I'll try to help you with that. And I love that. I try to say that to all of my sponsees as well.
Thank you. Next question is, I have witnessed a huge pushback to almost all of these suggestions. AA members take the "we are not doctors" as we should say nothing. More women are on antipsychotics and antidepressants than not in AA, in my experience, and the drug has become their higher power. Please comment. Thank you so much for what I think are wonderful suggestions.
Oh, thank you. So top of page 96, it really using chapter 7, working with others, and using those principles as a way of talking to anybody. So if anything that I'm talking about is not useful to you, please don't use it. If someone if this is unsolicited advice, my sobriety brother Craig C, he sends me a daily meditation every day. And last week I was so convicted when he said, Bob, our sponsor, Bob tells me that unsolicited advice is just another form of criticism. And I have a problem with unsolicited advice because I've got a lot of good advice. And so basically, if someone isn't taking my advice, I just want them to know what I forget is that every single one of you is a gift in my life. Like having this today is a gift in my life. And at any time I start requiring you to behave differently, to look differently, to think differently, to feel differently, for me to have you bless my life, oh, then I'm getting into management problems. And then I'm going to roll right into unmanageability. And then my pain is going to bring me back, I hope, either to a drink, which is horrible, or I hope to you and to humility and to my knees and to a higher power that just loves every one of us and the knowledge that you have one too.
Thank you. One more question from the chat, and then we have somebody here in the room. What about cultural things to consider? Any personal experiences that you can share about how to navigate culture or misunderstandings between providers who are white and clients or sponsees who are persons of color that you have experienced or heard of?
So thank you for that question. The number one thing to know about any provider, and especially in psychiatry and psychology, but also with physical medicine, is that it's your right. It's your medical right with any provider to feel safe and respected and understood. It's your absolute right. And if you're not feeling those things, if you can have a conversation with your provider, with your clinician, if they resist that conversation, then that's a very good time to ask for other referrals, to see somebody else. In terms of culture and in terms of age as well, and gender, or biological sex. All of the all the randomized clinical trials for all medications are done on a randomized sample of the United States. And what that means is that the samples reflect the census of the United States. What that means is that at best, only 4% less than 4% of the sample that they're using will be, say, for instance, Asian, or say Asian and over 55, and or in my 40s at the time when I was on the medication. And the bottom line is, the older we get, the greater sensitivity we can have to medications, and the likelihood that we have multiple providers who are doing a lot of medications. Something that's really helpful to do with someone who's older or someone who is unable to advocate for themselves. What you're talking about is being a cultural broker, and being a cultural broker for a family member, perhaps for a parent who immigrated here, or perhaps for a friend in Alcoholics Anonymous who has immigrated here, or who has English as a second language. That's a great time to learn about becoming a medical advocate and actually serving as a medical advocate for that person. And once again, as long as the patient, your friend, your family member, your sponsee signs a release of information form, there's no reason for a provider to say no, that you can't be there. And so that's something that that's a form of advocacy that you can certainly help them to assert their right for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question in the room. Is there anyone at Puget Sound Central office? Okay, great. Go ahead.
Hi, Joel, alcoholic.
Hi, Joel.
My question is, do you or how do you suggest that a sponsee might seek psychological or psychiatric help?
So the question is this for me. Is the person having trouble getting through all 12 steps? Is the person having trouble being consistent with a home group and taking commitments at a home group? Is the person able to read with you? Or if they're unable to, if it is a matter of education, unable to track you as you're reading the big book to them, or they're listening to the big book? Are they able to have a spiritual experience as a result of taking these steps, as a result of the ego reduction, as a result of emptying ourselves of ourselves? Are they able to go through it and then carry that message to someone else? If possible, So the two points of question for me as a sponsor would be, can I get them all the way through the steps up to 11? If they can, then let's focus on this. Let's focus on this. In step 11, then it tells us there are other helpful folks. This is a great time to dive deep into rabbinical training, or to go to the yoga teacher training, or to go and get confirmed, or to spend time in spend a lot more time going on retreats and things like that, in order to replenish in ways. And also, this is a great time where to troubleshoot all those areas. And if someone has kind of urgent issues at the front end that might prevent them from actually taking the steps, that's one of those places where getting assistance might be of help as well. And my number is on the Zoom. Also, the central offices, the intergroups have my phone number. You're more than welcome to ask me this question about specifics, because I suspect there might be something specific behind it. But in general, these are the times when I suggest to do that. And I also let people know, after lockdown, after COVID, there's a horrible dearth. There are far more people who need mental health services than there are providers. And the problem is that most of us providers, most of us are average. That's just a definition of average. And the problem with having very few providers that have space is that the likelihood of getting someone that's below average is higher, because those are the folks who, the likelihood is people who are below average are the ones who might have more space. Just let people know that this is more important than choosing a spouse. This is more important than choosing a nanny. Well, maybe it's not more important than choosing. This is as important as choosing a nanny. And be sure to know that as you're looking for a therapist, that it's your absolute right to feel safe, respected, and understood. And if you don't have those things, why would you listen to them? Why would you tell them stuff that you wouldn't trust them with? And how could they possibly help you if you don't feel safe or respected or understood by them? So shop around. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question specifically related, leaving medication up to our members and their doctors. How can we best support a sponsee who's prescribed high doses of SSRIs, Xanax, Ambien, and other medications?
Again, see if they're willing to have you come along with them, and that way you can voice your fears. The high doses are especially concerning, because especially if someone's on high doses, I never want them to try and go off their medications without medical assistance, under medical supervision. And so that this is, especially with higher dosages, and an entire pharmacopoeia, like a huge menu of medications. The greater the number of medications, the greater the necessity to really be cautious and under medical supervision to step down one drug at a time, slowly, and while doubling down on Judy Kennedy always tells me, if you're having a hard time, do what you tell people to do when they're new. Go to a meeting every day, call 5 other alcoholics and talk to them every day, which might mean 20 phone calls. Make sure to eat your meals and make sure to play all the time. Make sure to get on your knees. Like my friend Barbara, who's on here, my service sponsor, Barbara, who told me, Hiro, go into the bathroom and say, look in the mirror and say, God, my name is Hiro, I'm an alcoholic. And then ask him, God, I humbly ask you to remove my shortcomings, and then leave the bathroom and act as if he already has, and he will, honey. And she promises me, and that's been my experience. And to do this, double down on this stuff even more. And while doing something like making major changes in medication change.
Okay, next question. If I need to guide a sponsee to a resource like a psychiatric ward, where's the best place to find these resources? Do I have them call the crisis line to get connected?
You can call the crisis line, and you can ask for resources on their behalf. You could be on the phone with them. You can call the National Suicide Hotline. There's And there's so many resources that are available, which you can find on any of the websites, like your local your local Red Cross, any medical center worth its salt. For those of you in the Puget Sound area and in Seattle, you could just go to UW's counseling office website, and you could there's all of these student resources that you can have access to, that in terms of like the 1-800 numbers and the crisis lines, and you can accompany them with that. Like, you could be on the phone with them, you could put it on speakerphone and help them through it and be with them. And that's so incredibly helpful. It's so incredibly helpful when I'm in crisis to have another person say, hey, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Let's call this number together. Let's do this together. You don't have to be alone.
Okay, we have another question from the room.
Well, I do have a question, but first of all, Washington State has actually put in place a helpline specifically for mental health. It's like, I think it's 611 or 811. I can't remember the exact digits, but it's on the mayor's website. And my question is, I feel like in Alcoholics Anonymous, we address normal medications like, Xanax, Adderall, Ambien. Well, currently and recently, there's new alternative medications like ketamine therapy, PTSD medication with psilocybin, MDMA, and LSD. And I feel like Alcoholics Anonymous with those kind of things is very slow to recognize or acknowledge or talk about that. And if we look back at the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. was doing LSD therapy for many, many years and only stopped because of the backlash he got in Alcoholics Anonymous. But it helped him severely, with his severe depression. It really, really helped him to blossom and get new pathways built in his brain. I am someone who can't take regular Western medication. Since I got sober from alcohol and IV drug use, I have a really crazy reaction to almost everything. And so I have been directed to different plant medicines and different alternative therapies that, we talk about quite often. So I'm just curious, is there a opening for discussion in Alcoholics Anonymous to put out a new pamphlet or to discuss this? Because a lot of people, need help, and there's so many different avenues of getting it. And if there were questions that we could ask ourselves, is this really why we're doing this? Or is this because of our alcoholism or our, I just feel like it really needs to be addressed in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say this because I have gotten backlash myself just from a lot of the things I do from, other people in the rooms. And I know we're all opinionated and everyone has an opinion, but I think when it comes to mental health, that, and I want to cuss here, so I'm trying really hard not to, that needs to be lowered drastically, because some people will walk out of the rooms and they'll kill themselves if they hear something negative about a medication that they're on, or they won't come back to AA and they'll go get drunk again or use drugs. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any suggestions for how to talk about this in an open sense without encouraging drug use, in the way, because I do know from experience that other people I've known that have done different therapies have also gone out. So it really, you have to have a strong mental hold on whatever's going on with you in order to actually do certain things. But I think that's with any medication, even Western medication. So I'm just wondering if you, I know it's an opinion, but if you have suggestions on how to address this also with sponsees and in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really attracted to ketamine therapy because I really love ketamine, but then I know that the amount that they'll give me won't be enough. I'm also really attracted to psilocybin therapy because I love mushrooms, and but I also recognize that they won't give me enough either. And that's not a joke. That's just for me. That's my own personal history. Thank you so much for that question. Alcoholics Anonymous, the General Service Office and AA as a whole actually has an opinion about it. And our opinion is this: we have no opinion. That's the opinion. And you have a really important message for the sponsees that you attract. You have a very important message for them. And I want you to carry that message to them one-on-one. And what I want you to do too, is if you happen to share about this at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have people come to you and let you know that hey, you're violating Tradition 6 by affiliation with the medical establishment, or you're violating Tradition 10 that, or even 5, because you're going away from my experience of the traditions is that the traditions are an ethics code, and everybody will have an opinion about an ethics code. They're not a set of laws. And so you have your own God, you have your own code of ethics, you have your own experience. And what your experience tells me is that other people's unsolicited advice was threatening to kill you, or take you out of Alcoholics Anonymous at best. And so what if I were in your shoes, I would do what I currently do. I watch the door. I watch the door for who's leaving. And I can't do that in the main meeting of my home group, because there's 300 people and I sit in front. But in all the other meetings I go to, I watch the door who's leaving. I've got sponsees who sit in the back who also watch the door. When someone's leaving and they're looking upset, I've got sponsees who'll follow them. And I hope that that's something that you're able to do. And once again, to detoxify Alcoholics Anonymous for someone who hears the opposite of what they need in order to be able to stay. And I hope that you too are able to carry a message like what Mac B would carry to his sponsees. There are people in A who will kill you dead. There's some who'll save your life. Your job is to figure out which is which. If you like, I'll try to help you with that. And you could give them your experience, because it's so vital for those who are being chased out of Alcoholics Anonymous by things that they hear from the podium.
Hiro, I want to be respectful and cognizant of your how you are doing with the Zoom. And there's quite a few questions. Are we still okay?
We can go, if we like, to 11:30 if you want.
Okay, great. Next question is, I sponsored a woman that said she was too depressed to take the steps and was already on medications, had already talked to her doctors. She had 3 mental illness diagnoses. Please comment. Thank you.
So if someone's too, and once again, it's hard to tell. I mean, if she's currently seeking therapy, so if I had this happen, I would really want to ask my sponsee. It sounds like here, chapter 7. We tell them our own stories. We let them know. We let our protege, our prospect, our friend, with the pamphlet sponsorship and questions asked on sponsorship calls sponsorship, and what we call sponsorship. Let our sponsee know about the strange mental twist, and we leave it at that. And if they want what we have to offer, and if they don't at this time, on top of page 96, I look for others to sponsor. But I would also have part of me my heart is just tugged for a sponsor that says I'm too XYZ to take the steps. And there's a part of me, you know, from my sponsorship line that says, well, here, let me not go that way. Let me come this way. If someone's in an IOP, for instance, in an intensive outpatient program, which is like a full-time job, and they're able to come to meetings in the evenings afterwards, I don't ask too much of them. I ask that we'll read a little bit together, and if they're doing a lot of step work in their program, I tell them, hey, feel free to read all that stuff to me. Feel free to tell me all the stuff that you're doing there, and I'll do my best to connect it to AA, and because whatever you're doing there, if you can't take the steps now, you're getting prepared to take the steps, and also you're a little bit kind of taking the steps, even though it might not look like the steps. It's going to be aligned with some of these steps that we're taking. There's stuff that we're doing that is going to be really, really similar to what you're already doing now. And if your sponsor will allow you to see their to have even just a conjoint session, as like a lot of my patients will say, hey, can my spouse come in and talk with you together so they can help you, give you a perspective of what's going on for me, or can a family member? I often find that that's helpful. As a therapist, what I let the person know is, we're not doing couples therapy, we're not doing family therapy. Thank you so much for coming in. You're coming in to make me a better clinician for my patient. And any therapist of their that's worth their salt, that's a lie. Many therapists will welcome that. And so you might, again, use the things that, the suggestions in this, in the workshop, to be able to open the doors. And if not, you know, I got a sponsee who asked me to sponsor him 12 years ago, 12 and a half years ago, when his daughter was brewing, right? when his wife was pregnant, and he had a few months sober, and then for 10 years he would call me or text me from his garage, and he couldn't stop drinking. And as a result of drinking on diabetes and a work injury, he hasn't actually been able to take the steps. He's coming up on 2 years, but he's in meetings all the time, and he's on Zoom, and he's in so much pain. And we're going through the book really slowly. And I love what both Barbara and Judy tell me, which is that, you know, with some people, with some of our sponsees, we get to go at their pace. We get to go with them slowly. We get to have our fear that they're going to go out, but we get to know that for some folks, if this is their path, then what I get to do is be alongside them, be a good friend, do the stuff that it tells us in chapters 8 through 11. Try not to criticize, complain, condemn, or have contempt, and just be a kind and loving friend that can show them what the God and the big book that I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. And at the very minimum, they found a friend who's supportive, and it's such a hard space to be in, because I know what helped me. What helped me was the steps and being in meetings and active work with my sponsor, and then diving into service work. This absolutely helped me, but I'm able, and I'm physically able, and I'm financially able, and I'm mentally able, and I have to remember that if I project my ability onto someone else's stated disability, that's just another form of prejudice for me. And I don't want to do that. I just want to accept them just as they are and help them, just like chapter 7 suggests that I do.
Thank you. So we had somebody post Palouse, Mindfulness, Insight Timer, Calm, Headspace as more resources. Some of the community centers offer mindfulness classes. Jennifer wanted to say that she looked it up, and it's actually 711 is Washington State Mental Health line. Let's see, we have a question about, somebody says, simply asking sometimes, when was the last time you went to a doctor, can be, helpful. And somebody recommends Washington Recovery Helpline. Question is how to navigate cannabis use now that it's legal here in Washington, and I know also in California, but it is still mind and mood altering. How to navigate?
So when my sponsees ask about how to sponsor people on cannabis, I think the same things apply. For me, with my sponsees, I basically let them know what was suggested for me, and the most difficult suggestions that I want to suggest to them, I try to put into the first person. This is what was suggested for me. This is what was helpful for me. I know that I get into trouble being a director. When my sponsees tell me, like, oh, you gave me this direction, and I want them to know that it's not a direction, it's a suggestion. When I'm the actor turning into the director, I get into unmanageability problems. I really don't want to be a director. I just want to be a humble servant. I just want, because when I allow myself to direct, I can become a bleeding deacon. I just spent a day last week making amends to the entire, individually, and all of the board members and some of the committee members of the H&I committee, because I've been turning into a bleeding deacon the last 8 months. I even had to call the chair of a H&I committee and tell him, oh God, you know that thing, I want to thank you for taking my call again today. You know that thing where you have to call someone and make amends for the amends you made? Yeah, I'm doing that now. And so for me, I try not to direct. I try to, like in this case, for me personally, I'll talk about like one of the things I tried to do before coming into AA was marijuana maintenance, and for me, it led me to a place of suicidality again. Um, and basically, the idea with any medication, any substance, is that I'm going to be able to have an experience on whatever substance I'm on, but it's going to be a substance, whatever it is, it may interfere between me and my higher power, God. And it's easy to confuse cannabis with my higher power. It's easy to confuse, hell, it's easy to confuse my wife. Hell, it's easy for me to confuse your approval with my higher power. And the more I can find enough power. The goal for me with everything is, with everything medication based, is what's the least amount I can take for me to have a spiritual experience. And once I've had a spiritual experience, can I see if I can reduce the thing I'm taking, and then take the steps again and have a spiritual experience. And if I'm still taking something, find out, especially if it's with a doctor, titrate down again to the lowest possible, and then take the steps again, all while sponsoring others. If I'm in step 12, all while sponsoring others. So I hope that's useful. I get scared with stuff like that. I gotta admit, and when I get scared, I start trying to direct things in my life, and that's a time when I can alienate. And so when a sponsee is on marijuana maintenance, that scares me. But I don't want my fear to get in the way once again of just being a closed mouth and understanding friend, of just letting them know that I can point them to AA no matter what, and letting them know that, and also by, I don't want my fear once again to get me into chapters 8 through 11 difficulties of having contempt or criticizing or complaining or condemning. So once again, I want to be able to have that space of letting them have a tradition 3 experience of, if they say they're an alcoholic, they're welcome here. They're absolutely welcome here.
Thank you. How do I help a sponsee who's in crisis, already in therapy, wants to meet regularly, but refuses to do the work over a long period, having constant panic attacks in my living room, and their mental state is progressively worsening to the point that they now talking about suicide? I started to fear that it's above what I or AA am able to handle, that I'm contributing to their decline.
One of my favorite things to do when I have no idea what to do comes from my first sponsor. And I would be like going blah, 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 to Wild Bill. And at one point he'll just go, God. And then I'm like, oh, damn it. Because I know what's going to happen. We're going to say the Serenity Prayer. And we say the Serenity Prayer. And so what I've done is I've shifted that a little bit. And we could do this together. What I do is like Will, my sponsor who's on here. Because one of the things that we started to do is every time he calls, if it's a good time, otherwise we find another time, we'll take 3 minutes. We'll just take 3 minutes. So let's you and us take 3 minutes. And if you're here on Zoom, you can close your eyes. If you're listening to this recording and you're driving, please don't close your eyes. God exists outside of our eyelids. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do our best to breathe in God and breathe out self for 3 minutes. What that means is, so often when somebody's like really freaking out or angry or on a rant, I'll let them talk for a little bit, and then I'll say, hey, do you have 3 minutes? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, if you're sitting down and you're not driving, you could put both feet flat on the floor. You could uncross everything. You could have your spine go long if that's something comfortable for you, so that there's a string pulling out from the top of your head up to the heavens. And I'm just going to breathe in God and breathe out self. If God's not, if you don't believe in God, don't worry about it. It's just whatever greater power, whatever greater serenity and beauty in the world. And what that means for me is I'm going to breathe out all of my stories of the past. I'm going to breathe out all of my recollections and memories and breathe in God's love. I'm also going to breathe out all of my plans for the future, including what's going to happen in 8 minutes, or even right after this meditation, and breathe in God's grace. My current experience of God's grace is tradition 3, that we are accepted. we are accepted. And all we have to do to experience that acceptance is to accept the acceptance. That's it. And so breathe in God, breathe out self. In other words, breathing out my finite power, breathing in God's infinite power. And I might find that my mind is wandering like 30, 40 times in just 3 minutes. That's okay. That's what the mind does. And anytime I notice where my mind is gone, I'm just going to try and kindly note and curiously note where it's gone and gently come back to breathing in God and breathing out self. And then after the 3 minutes, what we'll do is we'll say the we form of the serenity prayer together, followed by the words, thy will, not ours, be done. And if you're somewhere where there's a lot of noise or you're driving, just let all of the other things around you just flow through your consciousness, drive mindfully, and we'll begin now. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not ours, be done.
Hiro, call me.
I will, Barbara. I will call you.
It's about the pamphlet and the person who was behind it.
I will call you.
That pamphlet from here in Connecticut. Okay.
You got
Bye,
it.
everybody.
I just have a question because I came in late. Is there any way I can get a transcript of this? I see a little bit up here.
I just want to remind you that the recording will be made available on Seattle Intergroup YouTube channel, along with the PDF that was presented at the beginning of the workshop. Hiro, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time today and your love. That's what I get from you is love, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
All right.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Hiro.
Thank you for having this session. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So good.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I learned so much today. Thank you. And my sponsees, thank you too.
Hooray.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Apparently, I'm going to call Barbara now. Bye.
Bye, Hiro. Thank you.
Thank